Hello, fellow followers, and welcome back to FanZcene and another new episode of the Physical Media Club. And with me, I'm going to have a great conversation today with Tom from Midnight's Edge. Hello, Tom. How you doing?
How's everybody doing?
Yeah, glad to have you on here. I've been wanting to get you on this for a while. Talk to you some physical media, some stories, just a really great conversation. And other than what we do on Wednesday nights, so right off the bat, I want to ask you, how did you get into collecting physical media?
Well, I mean, the collecting part, or just
how did you get it? How did it all come about? Like, did you just like find yourself buying stuff? And
well, growing up, we got our first VCR around 84, 85, but I mean, I remember we rented them from here and there. Yeah. My dad would rent them, but where he worked, they had they rented videos, and they had like a bunch of chains, so they would get like multiple copies. And so he happened to work at the main headquarters, and so him and a few of the other guys would always just bring home whatever the new movies were before they were their street date, because they would get to watch them for free. They'd get them like a week ahead of time or whatever it was. And so my dad would always just come home with a stack of VHS tapes, still in the plastic and the cover and everything.
That's cool.
And so for years, that was renting movies to me. I had never really rented a movie where I got it in a plastic case until I was a little older. And the first time that happened, I was just like, where's the cover? Because I was just so used to being able to just look. So that just having that was kind of the beginning of that, just that kind of thing. So I have that attachment to this day. The covers, if you have, if anybody's a viewer of the Physical Media Show or 4K for you, I'm a stickler for covers. But
same.
Like it just from there. And I remember the first movies we actually owned would have been like that, probably that Christmas thereafter. My dad came home with a VCR that we actually owned.
Right.
And it was a Popeye, the 1980 film with Robin Williams.
Good film.
I'm trying to remember the other ones. There was a couple more that we had. It was some of the early VHS tapes that they had for sale. Maybe it was like Pinocchio. Well, it wasn't like adult films. It was like Pinocchio, like Popeye. And I can't remember what the other one was offhand. They're all Paramount titles, I think, besides Pinocchio. And maybe Beverly Hills Cop. It would have been R-rated. For some reason, it was either 48 Hours or Beverly Hills Cop, something like that. And so just that started the ball rolling. And I was usually the one pushing to get movies in the household. My mom was always like, if she found a good deal, then the other thing was, and this is why my memory's fuzzy on what those first few videos are, besides it being very early on. Whenever they would have videos that would get just a minor problem with at the video, because see, back then, for those, now we got to rewind, literally be kind to remind people that back then, especially considering VCRs were very expensive. People forget how expensive they are. Like by today's, they'd be like anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 just to buy a VCR back then. So a lot of people were very touchy about what they put in them. And if a movie would have just a little spot on the tape where it would get messed up, a lot of people would freak out. So they would pull those tapes instantly from the shelf, no matter. And in those times still, like, people got to remember, this is early on. A lot of those tapes were 80, 90, 100 some bucks a pop.
I remember that.
I mean, I'm sure they were getting a heck of a deal getting them in bulk, but at the same time, so like my dad would literally, they would just give them to the employees. So my dad would come home with stacks of tapes. Like I remember early on getting like Police Academy 2, National Lampoon's Vacation, Death Wish 2. I mean, just
awesome.
Having them with the clamshell, or the original Warner Brothers clamshell, because Warner started with the clamshells just like Disney did.
The black ones.
The black ones, with the green or blue or red dots they would have coming down the design. And usually just a photo from the movie. Those were really lame, but you get a nostalgic kind of thing for them. They're like the lamest of the lame back then, but you're like, they're just that little Warner Brothers tinkle of the and they had the stupid W worm yet because it was before 84 when they switched back. And surprisingly, Gremlins was the movie that they switched back with it with. And from there on out, they had the Warner Shield again.
Yeah.
But no, it was just, that was kind of a thing. So constantly just a flow of films when he was working there. So then when that changed, it was just me always buying used tapes at video stores or, you know, whatever by that point, sell through had become a thing. Yeah. So like, I mean, like you see back there, that's a poster, kind of ironic. I just happen to have these here. Like that's a poster for the video sell through for Secret of the Ooze. Right. So there was a lot of movies by that point, by the late 80s, early 90s, where if they were successful enough in theaters or they were family films, they would, kiddies even interested in it, they would go directly to in stores where you could buy them, you know, at your local fucking grocery store, you know.
Yeah.
That's actually where I picked up a lot of my tapes, because I actually had a really good deal with the local grocery store there, because they had a hell of a selection, because they had been doing videos since early on. And what they would do is work a deal out with me where they would just charge me whatever price it would cost for them to replace it. They would sell me the used copy of the original, or they would just upsell me a little bit on what a new copy would cost.
No.
So like, say if the movie was like, it cost them $5-6 or whatever in actual cost, they would charge me 10. No. Or they would just sell me their used copy for like $6-7 or whatever, you know, and then they would put the new copy out, or they just wouldn't get one at all if it wasn't a movie that really rented, and just sell it to me.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a thing that me and my buddy, me and my buddy had going there, and it helped that we worked for him and stuff, so we had a good rapport with a lot of the people. So, and that's where I would get a lot of the posters and standees early on as a young kid that I had growing up. And I mean, you know, just from there, it was kind of like this thing. So by the time I was 12, 13, I'd already built up a pretty good collection. But then I had a house fire when I was 13, so I had to start all over again.
Oh, that sucks.
But then by the time I was probably, because I started my video store that I opened up, and it was only open for just a little over a year. That was in 2001. Right. And by the time I was 20, I had accumulated just myself probably 400 or 500 tapes. And then from there, I built that collection to open up the video store with. And I was getting into DVD by then. Right. And I had one of the biggest selections around for DVD. I could probably have competed with Blockbuster or any of the big boys at that point.
Nice.
But sadly, 9/11 happened, and then from there. But then I worked at several mom and pop shops and movie gallery and stuff like that after that. But you know, collecting was just always kind of a thing for me. Like, to me, it came secondhand to just like getting record albums, you know, or later on, cassettes. You know, it was just, and that was where my dad especially, was kind of more so into music. My mom more so in the television, but she enjoyed films. But my parents were one of those, they weren't normally ones they would really watch a lot of movies over and over. My mom would sometimes, if it was something she really liked. My dad, the only time he would usually want to watch something over and over again is if he was drunk, and it was usually like, put on Superman or put in Star Wars, the original one, and that other bullshit, you know, like or Rocky 1 or Rambo 1, you know. He didn't want to go
where he fights a guy.
He did not like sequels. Like, he was not a big fan of sequels.
Oh, man.
So that was one thing where I always had my penchant for the original one always come from my dad, because he's like, pass the first one, who gives a shit?
Yeah, it don't mean anything.
Goddamn thing for that. You know, so like, you know, like it's just one of those things growing up. So like, and my dad was one of those who was always full of random knowledge, especially about television.
It's just like, knew
it. just, and so that's where I get that from. Like this whole, like, just randomly you're watching something, he'd be like, yeah, that guy right there. He's like, yeah, that's his brother.
Like, that sounds like me when I'm talking to people.
Like, so that's where that kind of started. So then I just became more of the movie guy, right? So like, I'd start doing that shit to him. Like, you know, he'd be the one that would do that to me when I was younger with television. But then when we start watching movies together, it'd be like, I'd be the one telling him the ins and outs. It was just kind of a thing. And, you know, every Christmas, it used to be a thing, whatever the big new movie was, you know.
Felt like what I did. That's me. I just was like, I just slowly, I was always the one that said, hey, mom, hey, dad, can we buy this? Can I get this tape? Can I get that tape? Grocery store, I would do that. You know, at the video store, I would buy the used copies. My mom hated them because I started to mount the collection. I had this shelf in the living room, and she hated them. To this day, she still hates that I have one in the living room because she wanted her knickknacks and stuff up, and she thinks it looks ugly. And my dad, though, me and my dad, we watched me, my dad, and my brothers. We could watch over and over and over. Much like that, I started being the one. My dad and them didn't do that. I just naturally started, hey, you know, that's the guy, that guy, right? And that's sort of how I did it. And then I just started buying more, and then had to slowly take my collection into my room because my mom didn't want it in the living room anymore. And then now I have it all the way around.
I remember that. Yeah, I remember when the collection got so big that my mom's like, if you guys plan on keeping these, they got to go out of the living room. Yeah, because she was kind of the same way. She didn't mind if they were in like a cabinet or underneath. She was always a bigger fan of we'd have the entertainment system with the nice cabinet underneath. So all the movies would generally go into them. And then when they too many for that, like, I mean, they were literally like 5 deep rows, and all that stuff. Then she'd always have like a dresser cabinet with like a nice big mirror or something nearby. Like whatever her stuff was in there, that would like a catch-all for a lot of her like sewing and stuff. Eventually that just got filled up with videotapes. So she got sick and tired of that. So she's like, yeah, this has got to go. So I like you said, eventually it was like my bedroom. It was a large repository for a lot of them. And then the one place we actually had like a den area besides the living room. So like down in the den area, I had a whole nother like setup of a entertainment system and all that stuff. And that's where all the movies eventually went. So that was kind of the thing, like, because that was like the last point where I really lived my folks anyway. So from there on out, I just had my own places mostly. So, but yeah, like that's kind of how it was too at my place. My mom was not a big fan.
That's what it is. And
having them all over the place.
They just get everywhere, and you have them there. And I was like, much like you, is like, what do you want for Christmas? I'd be like, I want this movie, this movie, this movie. And they're like, is that all you want? And I was like, that's all I ever want. It's really, people get mad at me.
Movies or music was usually the thing.
I remember when my oldest brother's wife, when she first started, and like 2 Christmases later, she was like asking us what we want, what they could, like a gift or two they could get us. I was like, I want this movie, that movie. And she goes, didn't you ask for movies last year? And my brother was like, that's all he ever asked for. To get used to it. So that's what I did.
Well, then just as you get to an adult, you learn, especially in the day of DVD, I learned to quit asking for movies. Unless I was more specific or it was somebody I knew, I could just be like, yeah, I want this specific thing. And blah, blah, blah. Because, and this reminds me of a story I read in The Onion. And it's hilarious because I don't know if it's a true story or not, but I could see it being a true story because this sounds like something that would happen to me. It was just this guy, he's like, he sets up the story really great too. Cause twas like the family Christmas party the week before Christmas and all that kind of stuff, going down. And all I wanted was Lord of the Rings 2 Towers DVD. And lo and behold, there it was in my hand. Grandma had got it for me. But then I noticed the dreaded full screen. And that was okay though. I would just politely kiss Grandma, thank her for the Christmas present, and then go exchange it on my way home for the widescreen copy. But of course, that one cousin wanted to watch it because he hadn't seen it yet. So he had to open it. And it just goes on and on about this whole, like, the tragedy of having to open up the full screen and now being forever stuck
with the full
2 towers and full screen. That was one thing when I went to the video store. Then I got used to saying it because we had to. But I would get into like shouting matches with people about that. It's like, it's not fucking full screen. It's half screen. Really, the widescreen one should have full screen.
Because it takes up more
and those should have pan and scan on them. Because I still got to explain it anyway. And people still don't get it. Like, I would sit there and draw out little diagrams and shit. I literally finally got to a point where I got so sick and tired of it. I had printed out like a thing that had like a shot of Darth Vader from Star Wars. It's like, this is widescreen. This is what it looks like on your TV. This is how much you're actually missing. This is what, just so I could just point to people like, this is what the difference is. Because we had such a thing when that became
Oh
Oh my
man.
God. It was a nightmare. The whole full screen widescreen thing. And then you had certain ones that would only release in widescreen, which I
Yep.
didn't mind, but then some of the people would gripe about, and you'd tell them, look,
Yep.
all you got to do is some features on your DVD player have a zoom, just zoom in.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm losing half the bit. That's what happens when
That's
you
yeah.
have a full
That's what you're
screen
gonna
movie. And, and it still just wouldn't compute.
Yeah.
Right? To some people, it just wouldn't. You're just like,
I
and
know.
then, like, and then the other side was like, well, or you could just stretch it out by turning your 16:9 off and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
If you knew somebody was a little bit more tech savvy. But most people would get it. Most people, eventually, it kind of, but the ones that would only come in full screen bothered me personally.
Yeah, I remember that.
I still have a couple to this day. Sadly.
Me too.
Yeah. That have never even, like, there's a couple, but I'm not going to get into the actual title. But anyhow, yeah. So that's,
yeah,
that was
I remember that.
My biggest gripes from working at a fan.
I remember because I remember when they started doing the first. It took me a minute to get into the widescreen because I was so used to the full screen, So I was like, "What is?" I don't know. And then you're like, "Oh, so this is what it's supposed to look like." Yeah. I get it. And then I did not want to buy the full screen ones anymore. I was like, I got to have the widescreen now because I want to see everything. So yeah,
there was a time where I would never buy the actual first full screen. I would always buy the widescreen, but like I would like because at that point I think I had a satellite and stuff like that, so there I had like Stars and some of the other movie channels. If a movie was only in 185, or I know if it was an open mat 35, I would just record it and not worry about buying it. So back then I still wasn't like everything had to be like that was the day and the age, of course, where you had 3-4 movies on a VHS tape each.
Yep.
We had not even gotten into that yet. Like I had
same here.
God knows how many of those. I mean, and if you count those in comparison to what I have now in just physical media, it might even be comparable. Not quite, but pretty comparable. Because you figure 3 movies a tape, a couple hundred tapes, that's 400 movies, easy.
Yeah, I can remember that. I remember like recording 2-3 movies, and then like we was also wrestling fans, so we'd like record a pay-per-view along with like 3 or 4 movies, and it just had like stacks and stacks of those. It was crazy to have all those at that time. How'd you get into horror movies? How'd you get into all that stuff?
Well, there's levels to that. Because when I started watching movies, of course, my mom was really pretty good about not being my mom and dad both, but mostly my mom was the one who kind of handled it, but like not being a big like, oh, it's rated R, you can't watch it. She was more worried about what type of violence compared to like if there was language, like stuff like Revenge of the Nerds, Police Academy, some minor nudity once in a while. Like early on she was a little bit more of a stickler for it, but like after a while those kind of movies didn't bother her.
Right.
But she didn't like horror movies. My dad was not traditionally somebody who was a horror fan. In fact, there's a quick story I remember. He was really excited for Predator for some reason.
Oh, yeah?
Because I'm sure all his friends were telling him it was just great. It's the best Schwarzenegger movie, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But when we actually watched it, well, it's funny because he was like, this is the first time he ever thought about dubbing a movie. As the statute of limitations are so past on it now. So but he's like, we might have to rent a VCR. My mom's like, for what? Like, this movie's so good, we're probably gonna have to watch it again. I'm like, what? Like, we're just letting you listen. Like, what the fuck is he talking about? Because I had no concept of this.
Yeah.
Before. He's like, maybe we'll rent one, or maybe we can borrow one from Daryl. We'll get one. I have a feeling we're gonna like this one. And he was just all hung up. This was going to be the best movie. We're gonna want to record it. And he explained that my mom what the hell the whole thing is. She's like, that's what the FBI is doing. Is all about. You'll get us in jail. And she was panicking on that. He's like, oh, nobody will find out. They do that all the time. Blah 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 blah. But after the movie, he was just kind of like, yeah.
Oh, he didn't like it.
It was too much like a horror film for him.
Yeah.
He didn't like Alien either for that.
Oh man.
He was not a fan of that kind of stuff. And I mean, he had been to Vietnam. He was a vet. I mean, and even certain movies about Vietnam, he was kind of with.
Iffy on, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've told I think I told part of the Platoon story once before.
Yeah.
Platoon on physical media, but like, stuff like Rambo and stuff like that, where and Missing in Action, where it was a little bit more
grounded, you could say.
Well, that's more fantasy oriented. I was trying to say, like that stuff didn't bother him so much. Like something like Platoon, it was like we'll watch it once and we're never watching it again.
Yeah,
like I don't ever remember watching like The Deer Hunter or a lot of other Vietnam films growing up. Like Full Metal Jacket and Platoon are the only two serious Vietnam movies I remember watching. Like even Casualties of War was one that my dad just had no interest in.
Yeah,
I'm sure there was enough about it that people told him that he's like, yeah, I'm not gonna.
Yeah, that pass on that.
Yeah, he didn't like any of that kind of stuff. He wasn't a big fan of gore. Like the closest he got was like the early Nightmare on Elm Street films, and even those he kind of fell out of. But then I got into it was probably about 8 or 9. But going back to what I was saying when I first started, Gremlins was actually scared the shit out of me.
Right.
When I was little, just the concept of it. And my cousins didn't help because they were telling me the shit's real.
The Gremlins are real.
Yeah. So like, and I was young enough yet to where I was still kind of, and that's where like my mom had to kind of explain to me how movies were. And I think we'd gone to the library and gotten some, like, I think I got the making of Star Wars and a couple other, because there wasn't a lot then.
Right.
Like, I think I have now somebody, actually a fan sent me a copy of that exact book, I believe. I wish I would have brought it up here now to show it, but it's like an old school, like children's library version of the making of Star Wars. It's got like a blue cover with like R2D2 and I think C3PO on it or whatever.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's just a kind of a basic idea. And that was kind of when I finally kind of started getting the concept. And I think there was another book that had something about like special effects. And I remember it had something about Superman and something else in it when I was a little kid. And so then I kind of came around the concept. So my mom was like, they're just Muppets. They're just like Muppets. Right. They're like a puppet. Right. So she had to kind of explain all that to me. And then finally, because the first time I watched it, I thought, I'm going to do it. I'm going to, I watched it. I got scared. And that's where this whole thing that I just said happened.
Yeah.
Well, 2 Christmases later, my aunt brings the movie over because she had a beta. My cousin had a beta. The Christmas party was at my aunt's or my cousin's. Right. So she had brought a few beta movies over, one of which was Gremlins. And of course, everybody wanted to watch Gremlins because it was just barely on video at that point, like a year at the most.
Yeah.
Because for those who don't know, it usually used to take a long time for these movies sometimes to come to video.
We're living in an age where it's a lot easier now than then.
Yeah, so Gremlins probably hit video, I think, very mid 85-ish, kind of somewhere there. I'd have to look. It was early maybe, but not that early because the movie came out in the summer. And then so then when the movie would come out, the video was usually about 9 months or so, roughly, guesstimate. And then about a year after is when it would pop on HBO and stuff like that. And sometimes it used to be a little longer than that back in the day. Yeah. That became the norm once it kind of became the pattern. But even then, like I said, because so it was still a new film at that time.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember what the other fucking movie was. It was something the kids didn't want to watch that they wanted to watch.
Gremlins is the best anyway, so.
Exactly. They were like, we're watching Gremlins. And I'm like, oh, shit, here we go. Because I was like, not sure if I was going to be able to handle it. Different setting, though. Knowing what I know now, I enjoyed the piss out of it. It ended up becoming one of my favorite films of all time.
Right.
And from there, the whole idea of how movies are made. I mean, for the longest time, I wanted to be an actor. Then eventually, that kind of morphed into a director and stuff like that. But I always kind of gravitated towards like rubber monsters and stuff like that. So that eventually led to this idea of, because my buddy of mine was really into horror films, and I wouldn't watch them.
Right.
Because my mom forbade it. And not only that, just from my experience, I just didn't think I could handle it. But by the time I got, with my Gremlins thing and a little bit, couple of years after that, I'm like, all right, I was about 7, 8 years old. I'm going to watch my first horror movie. I tried watching, I can't remember which Friday the 13th on TV. Even though it was cut, I still only made it like halfway through. For some reason, I want to say it was either 2 or 4.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was 4, because does 4 have the open with a bunch of the flashbacks to the other films?
Yeah, I think so. I think because
it was 4.
There's a curse or whatever.
Actually, because I kind of remember Corey Feldman, because that was kind of what got me into it. I'm like, oh, it's Corey Feldman from Goonies and Gremlins.
Oh, yeah.
Like you know.
They
And then I think after the first kill, I was done. But I was probably like 6, maybe, or whatever.
Yeah.
I wasn't even supposed to be watching it. Like, truth be told, I was actually, there was a movie on it. This is how geeky we were back in the day, going back to the collecting part. Truth be told, if there was 2 movies on at the same time, especially back then when you didn't have, there's no fucking way you could afford 2 VCRs.
Yeah, exactly.
If there was nothing on, say, like your friend was recording at that time, like my buddy would, here's a tape. This is on at 10 o'clock, but so is Friday the 13th part 4. Will you record Friday the 13th part 4 for me?
Right.
So we did that all the time as just a trade, you know, and then it got even better when my buddy, you know, he got a separate VCR from his folks. Like they got a new one and he got the old one.
Right.
So then we were like recording freaks. Like, and that's where I said, if you had any idea of how many copies, like we had movies off of TV shows, all entire runs. Like my buddy and I were such nerds. We would call the fucking local TV station and he would bug them so much that eventually they would literally just mail him like lists of the entire show runs and what show was going to be on when, because they got sick and tired of him asking what he's like, when is season 1 episode 1 starting? Well, I know when to start recording.
I need to push the button
because we figured this shit out early on. You know, they're in syndication, they play them in order.
Yeah, right.
You want season sets, and it's really started with like The Simpsons and stuff big time, but like 21 Jump Street was another one we did all the time. I think Highlander, a few comedies, but mostly like Tales from the Crypt type stuff we couldn't get all the time.
Right.
Like we'd also send out videotapes to our cousins, aunts, uncles. That's how, because where we live, we didn't have like Comedy Central, MTV, even HBO.
Oh yeah.
So like to get like HBO specials, like the comedy specials, and we would get like tapes of like Beavis and Butthead sent back to us, or South Park, you know, that kind of shit. Or, you know, that would be the cool thing.
Yeah,
like, Thanksgiving, I should get a stack of tapes from my cousin of all years recording Beavis and Butthead.
Right.
And we had that, you know, just fucking whole, and then we'd go through them all, figure out what order they would go in, and that's also where he would call up and get a, I don't know where he would get half this information, but that's kind of where I got into a lot of that stuff.
You guys had a system, man.
Yeah, we did. He would just call, when the hell does this start? And it's like he would get a hold of the right person, and he would get shit in the mail all the time. Like he had just like stacks and stacks of just man. This is The Simpsons here. This is the 21 Jump Street. This is Alf. You know, he was in the Full House and shit, so he had the Full House, and you know, it was just whatever we were into. We'd have all the run, like, so we knew most of like the numbers and stuff of everything and the titles and all that crap. It was just weird how we managed to do that from just a lot of it helped that we were from a small rural area. Yeah. And so like even the stations that we're calling are from bigger cities a lot of the time, but they're not that big. You know?
Yeah. I remember doing that. I didn't have quite the system like that. I was doing it all on my own. I recorded Lois and Clark, New Adventures of Superman, Sliders, stuff like that, because I was really into that stuff. I had matter of fact, I still think I have the Superman VHSs somewhere. I may have lost them.
We would usually try to get like something if we knew we were gonna like up front. Right. We'd try to start recording it from the start, but like, that was just, we would record almost everything, and then it was like, if we didn't like it, we just record over it.
Yeah, just record it.
And not only that, I would have like, if a movie was coming out I really liked or thought I was going to like, I would record all the interviews, making ofs I could find. Yeah. So I was already kind of pre-curating my own DVD special features.
Yeah, special features, man.
When I was younger, you know, you'd have like Batman Forever, the making of it. Then you'd have all the interviews with Val Kilmer and all the other actors that were on Carson, or at that time it was probably still Letterman and Leno.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying there?
Yeah, like, I know what you're saying.
You know, and if you know, if I get lucky and I just happened to be at my cousin's for a weekend, and oh shit, we just record HBO all weekend, you know, and if I happen to catch, you know, whatever, and then by that point I probably had 2 VCRs myself. And I would sit there, I was a dubbing freak. I was constantly editing and moving shit from one tape to another, and like, so I could keep all like, this is all the Incredible Hulk shit. Yeah. You know, I got to tape this like Incredible Hulk shit. Like, that's literally what it says. You know, like, or
That's funny.
interviews behind the scenes, or Independence Day. You know, like that's another one I think I still have somewhere that just out of my irony I kept for the longest time,
Yeah.
just out of pure.
Yeah, just like nostalgia type things.
Yeah,
I
just
think,
whatever. You know, I had one.
yeah,
I think I taped something else over it too, but it just still has that
the
label.
Incredible Hulk shit on it.
Yeah, or the Independence Day stuff or whatever it says. But yeah, a lot of time it was stuff. But yeah,
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 yeah. That's funny. Yeah, but yeah, I did it too. And like with the horror movies, surprisingly enough, my older brother and my younger brother, my youngest brother, they would be watching the horror movies all the time. My little brother was never scared of this crap, and then I'd be like peeking around the corner and stuff, and I would be like, "What's going on?" And then eventually, I just started, like, I gotta watch this, I gotta watch that, and then I started watching and all that, and that's how I got into all my horror stuff that I like. And I'm not really into much like the new horror. I just like like the 80s and the 90s and the 70s. That stuff like that. Just like I always liked that better. And then like the further it got into horror, I just kind of lost interest in the newer stuff.
Well, I didn't even really. Yeah, I guess I didn't even finish my story.
Oh yeah, go. I was just like the VHS stuff.
No, that was my fault.
It's like we have like people I've talked to, we have the same damn childhood and we just don't realize it. Cause like a lot of stuff that you're subscribing, I did myself.
Yeah, right. And just knowing a lot of the same kind of areas that certain, especially in the Midwest, it's so easy. Like every little town is just like every little town. I mean, speaking of Gremlins, that's kind of the whole thing. Like Kingston Falls is every small town, right?
Yep.
Like so like what had happened eventually was, I'm trying to remember the first one that really turned me on to horror films. I'm trying to remember. But between my friend and my cousins, because I had growing up where I had a set of cousins that were actually more like aunts and uncles.
Right.
Because they were roughly the same age as my folks, because my mom and dad's family both were huge families. So it was like 9 brothers and sisters throughout.
Hey, that sounds like my family too. My mom's got like 6 brothers and sisters. My dad's got like 9 brothers and sisters. So
like a lot of the older kids in the family of the older siblings were usually more like uncles and aunts to me.
Right.
Because they were that much older than me. So I did have, and they had their own kid by now, so like I used to spend once in a while, like during the summer and shit, I would hang out with my one cousin because they had a kid that was close to my age. And we just hang out and do whatever. So because he was a single child and stuff like that. And they loved horror films, and they actually were people who liked to dub movies a lot. So like I said, I knew people who knew, so they had a shit ton of horror films, right? Like I'm talking about just about everything from, like, this was the place where I saw probably Texas Chainsaw for the first time, almost every Stephen King movie you can imagine for the first time, all that kind of stuff. So like those kind of a thing, between that and just kind of getting loosely introduced to it through my friend, and then finally getting cable for the first time, because when I was 8, we moved to a bigger city because my dad actually changed jobs. It was a similar job to the one he had where I had all the videotapes, but that closed down, and the company that bought it gave him a similar job where they were, but they were such a big ass company that they just took over just took over the whole other one. So when we moved, I had access to HBO, Showtime, you name it, the movie channel, all that kind of stuff. All the cable channels I'd never had before. Nickelodeon, I finally saw for the first time. It was just like,
what is this?
It was like, dare. That's where I can kind of relate to Andre, my boss, when he talks about, growing up with the most stalest family content and then seeing Masters of the Universe for the first time, and that blowing his fucking mind because he's never seen anything like that. I can relate to that in several ways, because that was kind of like what it was for me with that barrage. And that's really where I kind of got into I'm going through every single fucking thing, what's on what, and highlighting what. And, we had 2 VCRs at that point. So both of them were burning each other out 24 hours a day, recording shit. But yeah, so like, that's where I kind of started creeping into horror. And then my cousins pushed me over that cliff. Like my buddy would keep pushing me, but my cousins are like, they kind of introduced me to some films, especially through Stephen King was a big one. Because like Christine was one that my buddy showed me a while back that is kind of on that cusp. Fright Night is another one. Lost Boys, some other ones like that. Like my folks didn't have an issue with. Like they didn't mind the ones that kind of skirted that line, but they didn't really like Friday the 13th. They didn't like Halloween. They didn't like Texas Chainsaw, all that kind of crap. But yeah, just one. I don't remember what age I was at this point, but just one. I finally was like, "Fuck it, I'm going to take the dive."
Right.
And watched, you know, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Pet Cemetery, all that kind of stuff, all in one weekend. And I just got barraged with horror films, and I just walked out of that weekend a lover.
Yeah.
And of course, my mom wasn't too happy about it, but she still like monitored a little more closely the shit I was watching now, because now my palette was Friday the 13th and Child's Play and shit like that mixed in with
Nightmare on
Ninja
Elm
Turtles.
Street.
Nightmare on Elm Street became a big one.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the one that really kind of clicked. Actually, to be honest, Nightmare on Elm Street is probably the one that really kind of was the bridge, because that is that fantasy horror kind of thing. And that's another reason why I like Halloween, the first one, and the second one, especially in the third one. Well, the third one was the one I actually first watched. Yeah. But those three that I kind of gravitated towards, because they were a little bit more stylistic than just hack and slash.
Yeah,
like, I like Friday the 13th, but to me, that's that much above generic. You know what I mean?
I get you. I feel you. Yeah, like it's pretty much the same movie every time. But
Street, Hellraiser a little later on, because Hellraiser was way too intense for me.
When you see that the hooks and stuff, it's like I can't do this. I was like, I can't do this.
Like, no, we're drawing the line at Hellraiser. You kids ain't fucking watching.
Yeah, you ain't ready for that. Because that's what I
fucking 14. Just like
I remember like the Puppet Masters and Nightmare on Elm Street. That's my brother. That's my brother's favorite. And Nightmare on Elm Street
was a big one that really kind of, because Charlie knew how to make movies that kind of skirted that line, and he knew how to get kids involved. He knew he was really good at throwing a lot of shit in there that he knew a lot of people would like, and somehow making it work. Boy, it wouldn't work. It really wouldn't work. But you know what I mean?
I know what you're saying.
It worked and it fired on all cylinders. When you got like those first few Puppet Master movies and some of the other stuff that he came out with that time, even Ghoulies for instance, like he just kind of had this way with, oh, I know this isn't exactly the same kind of thing, but I think they'll work together.
Right.
So he was really good at that.
And that's one of the things that also kind of confused me, is because I remember seeing the Puppet Masters, and then I watched Prehysteria. Because you're like, whoa, this is the same company that made the Puppet Masters?
Which is funny, because I think Charlie doesn't really like horror from what I've heard.
Yeah.
Like, he's not a big horror fan at all. Like, he doesn't really like gore. And all. That's why a lot of his horror films kind of end up eventually
he's more
out an alternate road.
He's into the ladies and exploitation type stuff like that, which I love. So.
Even the Puppet Master series kind of went kiddish.
Yeah,
look at it like
they did. They kind of went from like these monsters to like these good guys.
Yeah, and then to where I think even by the 6th, 7th one, I think they were PG-13 rated. So you're just like, what the fuck is this? And then they kind of took it a little bit back a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, give me a check and you can make whatever the fuck you want.
Exactly.
You know, like, do whatever you want.
I love Charlie Band.
I've been wanting to talk to him for a while. I talked to his brother. I still haven't released that interview yet, but no, it's that just the whole thing, that whole video store, the thing you got behind us here, like that is our childhood, right? Like walking in, that smell of, you know, cardboard mixed with old carpet mixed with popcorn and
candy.
That
you smell like that, like
because if you're in the one place, they always have that styrofoam up in the cases and stuff.
I love it. Oh, I miss that smell.
Had been picked up since like 1982, and the whole thing just kind of crumbles out all over yourself.
It's everywhere. It's like, what is this?
All over you. Like, no, I just at the video store.
Mom, I didn't do it. It was like that when I found it.
Yeah.
But oh man, I miss that smell, and I do miss the video store. I mean, I know some people don't understand the VHS love. I think that's sort of why so many people got back into the VHS now. But I've moved on to Blu-rays, 4Ks, and all that, which I love collecting. And it's a fun time, and I've had a great time reminiscing here with you and talking to you, Tom. This is an awesome conversation. You got anything else you want to say before we close it all out?
Well, like you just said, like nostalgia-wise, looking at it, the idea of it, I love it, but practicality of
I know. People's like, where do you buy VHS still? I was like,
I don't miss the bullshit, man. The shit I had to deal with between, it's not tracking, or you go and you buy a tape and it just doesn't work right. And to return a tape back then was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
Especially if you got it used or from whatever, or you just stumbled upon something that like you thought it was, one of those holy grail movies you've been looking for, and then the tape is just chewed to shit.
Oh, I hate when that happens. Yeah.
Or it ruins your VCR. Like, I mean, I've had that happen. That I know it's not a normal thing, but once in a while you get one that actually gets ate up and stuck in there, or whatever.
Yep. Yeah.
And not often can I actually blame a tape for actually killing a VCR, but
yeah.
So I shouldn't say it like that. But no, like as far as technology wise, the VCR was I don't know if we'll ever have another appliance in the home much like that, right?
Yeah, I don't think we will. It set a new age forward for home entertainment. It truly did, you know.
And it kind of ended with that. Even though now we can almost record anything we want between this and our computer, you know.
Yep.
It's just I still miss that convenience of once in a while just being able to go click when I'm watching something and record it.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you know, just, you know, sometimes holding that tape, the cases, and the you know, sometimes getting those big box sets were also kind of a big deal, you know.
Yep. I remember it's like 4 tapes for one movie or mini series that you saw on TV, and
or
the
clamshells.
Like
Star Trek set when
they and they made and the Freddy's that made the Freddy, and then it's a good time. This nostalgia. I do wish they would do stuff like that with like Blu-rays and DVDs. Like even like the new Star Trek that came out. That's cool. You know, have that in that little set. You know, where it's all one. But I kind of would like all the separate. I mean, I know that takes up shelf space, but that would have been cool to make the ship again. You know, with like the
you still could have done it on the 6, and you know, just to pay homage.
That would have been cool.
It would have been nice. Yeah, and I mean, if anything, if there is any of the, you know, industry people listening, that's
do something like that.
Trust me,
people will buy it. Yeah, make it practical. Don't give us like the big long, like the Star Trek big long set that you got. Make it like the old box set, at least where it's like this, you know, where you can set it on your shelf, or if you can take them out of the thing and just set them up one by one.
Just put a regular case inside something. That's honestly, like Vinegar Syndrome and those guys got the right idea.
Yes, they do.
Do that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and that, or if you're going to make a box set, make sure it's going to fit on a shelf. Like that's the other thing, because chances are it may look nice, but I'm going to chuck it and put it in regular cases and fit on my shelf.
Yeah.
I don't mean necessarily throw it away, but it's going to get tossed in another box somewhere.
Yeah.
Collect dust. But no, I love talking to you, and we love hanging out on 4K for you, and of course physical media and stuff like that. So and of course I'd love to do this again sometime soon, because there's tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff. We barely even scraped the surface. So
I know we could talk forever, man. This could be like a 4-part series.
And I mean, I do have a little bit more time, but I know you try to keep these.
If you're going to get a little something else to say.
Well, no, I was just saying, like, I could come back again sometime.
Yeah, I'll bring you back. And
if there's anything anybody out there listening wants to know, go ahead and throw the comments and
put it in the chat. Make sure you like and subscribe. Subscribe to Midnight's Edge, Midnight's Edge After Dark, Midnight's Edge Radio. 2, is it? It's a 2 at the end now of it.
No, I have 2 just as a backup. The main one's back up and running again.
Okay. Yes,
but I guess I could share one more story. Why not?
Go ahead, real quick. We'll close out with your
first movie I ever rented on my own with my own money. How about that?
Oh, that sounds a good one.
I was 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
We had a garage sale, and I was selling cupcakes and cookies and lemonade. And I think by the end of the day, I had made like $2 or $3, I think, at the most, maybe, if that. And so my mom and I went up to the local like a gas station. They had videos there, and I picked out Jaws, the original Jaws. It was the first time I got to see it uncut. I was like, because back then they still chopped the shit out of it.
They did.
And that was another thing too. We could talk about that shit.
I know, like I still think that's where some of the Mandela effect comes in with people, like, 'cause they saw the TV version, and then when they see the theatrical version, it confuses them, and they think there's stuff that's supposed to be in it that wasn't it, and that's because of TV, man. I'm telling you, that's a TV cut. I'm telling you.
I know, man. It's the same thing with me. Like growing up, I'm just like, not only just the TV cut. Like I started noticing the difference sometimes between a video version and the theatrical version.
Yeah, because sometimes they change when they released them.
Because like HBO would have the theatrical version. Jaws: The Revenge one comes to mind specifically.
Yeah.
Because the video version, I watched it, I rented it when it first came out. It ends the way it does, and it has like a few other scenes in it that are a little different. Yeah. All of a sudden, got one of those tapes from my cousin, like I told you, you know.
Yeah. That you're cool.
It had Jaws: The Revenge on it. Watching it, all of a sudden at the end,
it's different. What happened here?
What the hell is this? Where's Jake? He didn't. What? completely different ending on top of the minor differences I just must not have noticed before then, or I might have noticed, but it just didn't really click. And you would get that. That's, I think you're right. I think that's where a lot of the Mandela.
I do, because I don't think people realize it, because they used to, some people don't remember. They see it on TV and they're like, oh, that was a great movie. Then years later they find it at the video store,
or even the music.
Yeah, and the music, and it's like, whoa, what happened?
Because I remember, because like I said, I had National Lampoon's Vacation for since it came. It was a brand new movie when my dad brought it home,
right?
And I don't even think the second one was out yet, to be honest. Like, and in the movie, in the video, it has that other song in it that's not "I'm So Excited" by the Pointer Sisters. And the first time I realized that, it was like on HBO, probably 10, 15 years after the fact. My parents just happened to flip by it, and there it was, and that scene just happened to come on. And I'm like, that's not the song. And my mom and dad go, well, that was the song in the movie theater, though. And that was kind of one of the first times, really. And then I started noticing that too happening on video cassette covers and stuff. The music in this movie may be different from the.
The
Wayne's World was another one with they wouldn't let them use the Stairway to Heaven lick and some other stuff like that. Yeah. So you get that sometimes too. And so sometimes I would have the VHS release of something, but I would also have the recorded version off of Showtime or HBO, because there was either just a very little difference, or the TV version, the deleted scenes or the alternate takes. Not only that, it was a completely new version, so it was completely repan and scanned and everything like that. So sometimes, even though it wouldn't be adding scenes necessarily, you would get a completely different version. Because of the pan and scan.
Exactly, yeah.
But like Ghostbusters is one I remember that the VHS is way different than the TV version pan and scan and so on. And yeah, so like you get that a lot too. So
yeah, but that was cool. That is a good conversation. That's cool that you get Jaws for the. I can see now. I see where you get all this love for like Gremlins and Jaws.
And that's kind of another horror movie like Jaws. Yeah. I mean, not then thinking about it. I don't even know if my parents. I mean, I'm sure they. Because I remember my mom, the first thing she says, oh, that scared the hell out of me when I was a kid. We went to see that in Chicago when I was a senior. You know, it was like, I didn't even think about it being a horror movie then, but like that, it was just, it was another stepping point, like Gremlins was, you know, to that. And then like Nightmare on Elm Street really was the one that opened the floodgates. You're right about that, because of Freddy was just so theatrical. The teenage aspect, I could relate to a lot of the, you know, just being on the verge of being a teenager. I liked a lot of the actors in it. I happen to be a 21 Jump Street fan, so Johnny Depp naturally led into that. So I'm not kidding when I told people like, I actually fell out of being a Johnny Depp fan, believe it or not. Considering everybody like became, when all of a sudden it was like, hell, I used to go to his movies. Like I remember going and trying to track down Benny and June. Because Nick of Time. Because I
love Nick of Time.
None of the theaters had those fuckers. I had to go to some small little dinky theater somewhere to find them. Like, my buddy and I were huge Johnny Depp fans growing up, because we would always pick on these little actors, and as soon as they become huge, then they were everybody else's. Then we'd move on.
We move on.
Will Smith was one of mine. Jack Black was another one. Like I would just pinpoint them, like that guy's going to be big. Next thing you know, they're big, and it's like, okay, who's the next?
Johnny
Depp lasted a while because he never got big until Pirates. Like people don't think about that. I mean, he was around, but he had Edward Scissorhands in a few films that would kind of just barely make
here and there, just
barely push him up to that point, but it was really Pirates that just pushed him to the and then at that point it was like, he's everybody's now. I
think the last one I saw before he did Pirates was The Ninth Gate. I think that was like one of his last films I saw before he became huge with the Pirates. So the
only other ones, I mean, of course I liked a lot of them, but like Eddie Murphy and Jim Carrey were ones like that. Like Eddie Murphy, of course, was world famous by the time I was born. But I mean, just growing up, he was probably my favorite actor just in general. And then later on, just discovering others. But like, it was just, I would have my certain ones and directors and stuff like that. But that are all topics we can get into later.
And when you come back, I'll have you come back and we'll do another conversation on all types of things, man, physical media, everything. But I'm glad to have you on here. And thank you once again, man, for this conversation. This has been a good one. I've really enjoyed this one. And like I said, everybody, like, subscribe, share it out. Join us on 4K4U. Join us on the Physical Media Show. Sub to Midnight After Dark Radio, all that good stuff. And we will see you guys on the next one. Have a good day.